Well, hello and happy Tuesday. This is Angela, your host for tonight. And tonight on the live webinar with Dr. Ray and Jean, our topic is forgiveness. So they were inspired by a video they saw, which was posted on our Facebook earlier today. So if you have access to our Facebook account, Couple Synergy, or the Couple Synergy community page, you're welcome to go ahead and watch that after the webinar or later on. So you get to see the video that inspired this topic tonight. So while we're waiting for Dr. Ray and Jean, all I'm going to do is ask everyone to just reflect on what forgiveness means to you. And while you define it in your mind, just go ahead and try to explain what that looks like if someone were forgiving someone else or themselves. Hello, Dr. Ray and Jean.
Hello.
Good morning.
How are you?
Oh, good morning.
Jean loves to say good morning every single time because it's the best way to start the day.
Yeah. So today we are going to talk about, I'm sure you already mentioned the topic of forgiveness.
I did.
And this was inspired by a little video clip that we saw this morning. So we wanted to share that.
Yeah. So, we're just going to play this video clip and, and then just kind of talk a little bit about the topic of forgiveness, after we play that. So, Ange, I don't know if I could share the screen. Is that possible?
Yeah, I would say, can you try it? And then if it's not possible and it needs permission from me, then it'll pop up, right?
Yeah, it's saying I need permission.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so would you like to try it again? Okay. I think that might work now.
Yep, there we go. Perfect. Screen. All right.
Has really, really harmed you.
So what? It's easy to sit there with the anger and the toxicity and the bitterness? That's easy?
Oprah and her mom didn't have the best relationship. She left little Oprah behind in Mississippi when she moved to Milwaukee.
You have in your own.
And Dr. Ray, if you unmute yourself, then we'll be able to hear it, because right now we cannot.
There we go.
I loved her the way that she loves people's style.
We didn't have a strong relationship. She never knew me. She never really knew who I was.
The love that we're seeing Oprah give the universe really was born out of your love for her.
Right.
My mother and I had a complicated relationship. It wasn't until I became the famous Oprah Winfrey that I felt that she was even interested in seeing me.
I remember the first night entering into that house and being told that I wouldn't be able to sleep with my mother and I wouldn't be able to sleep inside the house. It was because of the color of my skin. I don't know how I knew that, but I did.
I went through a real period of self-discovery because you have to find other reasons for appreciating yourself. It's certainly not your looks.
My grandmother was a maid. That's all she ever knew. Many times my grandmother would whip me with switches. She would braid the switches together and I'd get a whipping. And then in the middle of whipping me, she'd say, "Stop your crying, stop your crying." And I'd get whipped until I would stop crying. And then afterwards she would say, "You better wipe that pout off of your face. You better put a smile on your face." So you'd have to now act as though the beating that you just had didn't happen. I realized that pain of not being able to express the emotion, that would be a huge pain body that I would end up carrying. When I was separated from my grandmother and sent to live with my mother at 6 years old, I suddenly land in a place that's completely foreign to me. I don't know anybody. I don't really even know my mother. I walked into that space feeling completely alone and abandoned with no explanation of why I was being sent away. I remember the first night entering into that house and being told that I wouldn't be able to sleep with my mother and I wouldn't be able to sleep inside the house, but there was a little foyer porch before you actually got inside the house. And I was put outside to sleep there. I later realized is because it was the color of my skin. And my mother was boarding with this very light-skinned Black woman who could pass for white. And I could tell instantly when I walked in the room that she didn't like me. It was because of the color of my skin. I don't know how I knew that, but I did.
Years later, Oprah continues to be judged and criticized for her appearance.
The new assistant news director came to me and said, you know, your hair is too long, it's too thick, your eyes are too far apart, your nose is too wide, and your chin's too long, and you need to do something about it. I went through a real period of self-discovery because you have to find other reasons for appreciating yourself. It's certainly not your looks. My name is Oprah Winfrey. Oprah spelled O-P-R-A-H, and if you noticed, it's Harpo spelled backwards.
So this show that just getting underway nationally.
Mm-hmm. It's going to do, it'll do well.
And if it doesn't?
And if it doesn't, I'm not defined by a show. You know, I think we are defined by the way we treat ourselves and the way we treat other people. You know, it would be wonderful to be, you know, acclaimed as this, you know, talk show host who's made it. That would be wonderful. But if that doesn't happen, there are, you know, other important things in my life. The moment I did that talk show, I felt like, oh, I can be myself. I felt like this is what I'm supposed to do. And that was August 14th, 1978. And that was the beginning of fulfilling the calling.
My mother and I had a complicated relationship. It wasn't until I became the famous Oprah Winfrey that I felt that she was even interested in seeing me.
I knew Oprah was going to be something.
What do you think is the biggest gift that you've given your daughter?
I loved her the way that she loves people now.
My mother, she never knew me on this side. She never really knew who I was. And I realized that I was the kind of child who was always searching for love and affection and attention and somebody to look at me and say, yes, you are worthy.
Oprah and her mom didn't have the best relationship. Years later, we're shocked to learn that Oprah had a half-sister, Patricia Lee, whose existence had been kept secret from Oprah.
Why didn't you want to own up to it?
Well, because I thought it was a terrible thing for me to do that I had done. Gave up my daughter.
You have in your own mind what a mother should be and what you wanted your mother to be. And in many cases, your mothers and your fathers can't be what your ideal is. Isn't that correct?
Yes, because they were broken when you got them. There are people amongst us like you and like me and many people in this room who are voluminous. We are 10-gallon people. But we may have been born into families of people who have pint capacities. When you are a 10-gallon person and you want love, you want it on a 10-gallon level. But a pint person, they could be giving you all that they have, sincerely giving you everything, but it doesn't fill you up because you're bigger than that. But you must realize that some people, that's all they got.
5 years later, Oprah is forced to confront her mother.
My mother was dying. I got a call from my sister that she thought it was the end. So I hopped on a plane and I surprised my mother. And she's like sitting in this little room. It's like 80 degrees. And she just watches TV all day. I sat with my mother and I said, I don't know if you're going to make it. Do you think you're going to make it? And she said, I don't think I am. And I had a conversation with her about what that felt like. I started telling all the people who cared about her, if you want to say goodbye, you should come and say goodbye. And then I left, and I left knowing that that was going to be the last time. The next day, I had a bunch of meetings in California, and I canceled all of those meetings, and I went back to Milwaukee because I felt like I had not closed it. I wanted to make sure that I said everything I wanted to say. So I went back, and I waited for a way to say what I wanted to say. And I was praying for a way in, and I just walked in with my iPhone And something said, voice said, play some music. So I started playing some music, and I could see that it opened her a little bit, because my mother's been a very closed down person. And I could see that the music gave me an opening to say what I needed to say. And what I said was, thank you. As a young girl, having a baby, no education, 17, you get pregnant with this baby. Lots of people would have told you to give that baby away, and you didn't do that. And I know that was hard, and I want you to know that no matter what, I know that you always did the best you knew how to do. I thank you for being the mother that you knew how to be, even though many times it wasn't what I thought I needed. And I want you to know I bless you, and I give you peace, and I want you to go in peace and to know I love you. I would say to anybody, say the things that you need to say while the people are still alive, so that you are not one of those people living with regret about what you should have said. Forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could be any different. You think forgiving means accepting what has happened to you. Well, it is accepting that it has happened to you. Not accepting that it was okay for it to happen. It is accepting that it has happened. When I got that, I think it took me to the next level of being a better person, because I don't hold grudges for anything or any situation, and neither should you. It's letting go so that the past does not hold you prisoner. Forgiveness is like medicine that can heal your pain, it can bring you peace, and ultimately, this is what we want for all of you, to be free. To be free.
If I had held on to all the things that happened to me in my childhood and in my life, I wouldn't be standing here today. We were taught to think that it is powerful to hold people hostage with what they did wrong, that that's your power, that's how you get back. No, I didn't forget it, and I'm strong, and I'm tough. But it takes more strength to forgive than it does to be vengeful and angry. Forgiveness does not exonerate the perpetrator. It does not justify their behavior. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself.
So in true Oprah fashion, that was fabulous. You know, we've talked a lot about forgiveness, and ultimately it is the healing, the culmination of healing. And so if you've ever heard us talk about resentments, you know, we talk about resentments, that it's important to validate when you have a resentment, that you give yourself permission to say, what happened wasn't okay, and it hurt and I don't like it. And that's a really important part of the process, but it isn't where you want to get stuck. But it does take a level of self-esteem just to say that much.
Too often we come across clients who have been through horrendous situations in their life. And, you know, the stories that we've heard are just, you know, burned in our brain.
The keeper of the secrets.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of times they ask, like, how can I forgive, you know, the person that's hurt me? You know, the person that has, you know, really victimized me. And legitimately, they were a victim. Is it too much? Is that better?
That's better.
So, you know, legitimately, they've been victimized. And for them, holding on to it, you know, seems like a life raft, you know, an ability to stay afloat, you know, through life.
I think at one level, it's appropriate. It's appropriate to have anger. It's appropriate to use that anger to protect yourself especially if you are in the middle of a situation with people who aren't safe.
It's justified.
But it isn't where you want the story to end. It isn't what you want to define you, and it does define you. And this is why you always hear us talk about everything as a long game. And the different things that in my life that came up for healing in my 20s was different than what came up for healing in my 30s or my 40s, and now in my 50s. And there's always this, some people call it like the layers of the onion, or digging deeper or something like that. And it really is true. And I think all of that has to do with wherever you're at in life. And so this idea of validating your pain, which usually comes up as resentment or anger, is really important so that you can begin to process it. And the next level of processing it is, and Oprah said it really well. She said it wasn't something that didn't, she said it happened to you. It's not saying it hasn't happened, it happened. It's like that kind of concept. And then you go to this other level, accepting that it has happened.
Right.
Not accepting what happened, but that it has happened. That's right. And then to get to this level where you start to look at, I'm on this journey of being on this planet, and what is this really about, and how can I use this? So you've always heard us talk about fertilizer all the time. What's it made of, right? It's made of all the stuff that hurts us. It's all the crap of our lives. And so when that decomposes through grief. And the grief is the processing of what can I do now that this thing has happened to allow it to make me become even more something better.
One of our clinicians was meeting with me the other day for supervision, and she was talking about a client that she has that is of Muslim descent, and she is now living in this country in a household with her husband, her husband's parents, and her parents as well. It is very traditional for a traditional Muslim family, in the old country, but here in the United States, she finds herself in between two worlds. The world of being in corporate world, where she is, has independence and she has authority, and coming home, she finds herself in a household where she has none, where she has to now assume a role, that is more cultural. And, the clinician was asking me, what is it that I can help her do to change the situation? And I said, I don't know if there is anything that she can do to change the situation. And maybe acceptance and surrender is the place that she needs to go. Now, that doesn't mean that she has to be a victim, in her circumstance. Her circumstances is situated in a way that, she has to kind of conscribe to these cultural, norms and rules that she is under, and then go into this world here in the society where she has more freedom and independence. But accepting that this is the life that she is choosing, because she does have a choice. And accepting that no one is victimizing her as long as she doesn't continue to see it that way.
That's that part where that man was talking about being a 10-gallon person. But maybe the people who are raising you are pint size, and that's the pint sized people brought her into the situation where she could live a 10-gallon life. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what Oprah ultimately got to with her mother, is that all of this made me, and so there was value in it. We don't like it, of course. I don't like it. I don't know anyone that likes it, But, Carolyn Mace said this once, and I've talked about this before, that, she was teaching, and this woman was like, she asked this woman, how can I help you? The woman said, you tell me I paid my money. And she said, I'm going to sit here till I can find a way to say thank you for saying that to me, which of course was not an opportune time for the rest of the people in the room. And, those kind of comebacks of how do I say thank you for this? Because ultimately you can't forgive until you say thank you. So, you know, when you look at resentments, you're looking at owning it. Apart from validating it, you look at owning it like, I needed to have this in my life for some reason. Some situations we choose in our lives.
Right.
We choose it, or, you know, we allow it, one of those three things. And then we really look at, well, what is this teaching me? What can I learn from this? How do I grow and become from this? And when we get there, then we have to say thank you. I am grateful that I went through this experience because it has created the person I am today. And we're not so much even talking about the personality or the life that we're living right now. We're talking about your evolution, your soul evolution of becoming.
I think a lot of people think that forgiving those that have hurt you is giving in, right? Or just, you know, surrendering, giving up power, right? Giving up power to the people that have hurt you. And, you know, I love what, you know, that author that was talking on stage said, that this is the greatest gift you can give yourself. So forgiveness is really not about other people at all. You know, it's really about allowing yourself to release that, you know, that burden and the baggage that you carry along with you. You know, the situation you may have found yourself in, or that you were placed in, you had no choice in, but it is your choice on whether you want to carry that baggage throughout your life. Yeah.
You know, I think this is a great time for a real quick question. So I'll read the question as it came in, and just reminding everyone on the webinar tonight that you're welcome to use the chat or the Q&A, and you can ask anonymous questions if you'd like. So the question goes like this. There was a falling out with a relative and I. So much so that we haven't spoken in years. I am ready to forgive, more so because I want to reconnect with them. But I'm also very nervous about how it will be received. Any thoughts about how to handle this?
I love this question because it's family, you know, and family is such an interesting part of our lives. Family is there at the beginning, it's there at the end. You know, even Oprah, like her sister who was placed for adoption as a child, joins up at the end. You know, she's part of the family again. And family gives us these opportunities that no other relationship on the planet really gives us. And those are tough things.
Whether we want it or not.
Whether we want it or not. And, you know, one thing that I would really like to say to that is, and you saw how Oprah dealt with that, you know, you have to see them as they are. You know, if they're pint-sized people and you've evolved to a place in your life where you're thinking differently, you can't necessarily have an appropriate conversation with someone who isn't at that place with you. And so forgiveness can still happen if you come to a point of acceptance, accepting them as they are. You know, and one thing that she said is, I think my mother did the best she could with what she had at the time. And I think that's true of all of us. I want you to really think about this for a moment. I want you to just think for the next 10 seconds, the times you got hurt. As many of them as you can remember. And now for the next 10 seconds, I want you to think about how many times you hurt someone else. It's so much harder because when we hurt someone else, we don't feel it. When we are the instrument of causing a growth process in another person, it doesn't hurt us, it hurts them.
And a lot of times we don't know that we're hurting people.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not our intention.
And the majority of parents out there are doing the best that they can in any given situation, and always with the intention of love and trying to do their best. Does that mean they haven't wounded their children? I can guarantee you, if you're a parent, you hurt your kids. I guarantee it. I've hurt mine for sure. You can't not, you're human. And why are we here? What is this about? And if anyone's going to set up our life lessons, it's our family. And if anyone's going to treat us badly, more likely to be our family than anyone else.
I want to add something to the answer of that question, because forgiving, your family member and reconnecting with them are two very different things, because there isn't any guarantee that your family member is going to be ready to reconnect, but you can still forgive. I love the story of Wayne Dyer. And if any of you are not familiar with Wayne Dyer, please, just look him up. He's got plenty of YouTube videos. But in some of his earlier lectures, he talks about his upbringing, and he was brought up in a single parent home. His father left very early, in his life, and his mother had to struggle to survive and to put food on the table. And he vowed early on in his life that he was going to become famous, he was going to make a lot of money, and then he was going to find his father and he was going to shove it in his face, right? And so he did go along that path. He struggled very hard to become famous, and he did become famous. And when he got to that point, he went in search of his father. And he found that his father was living in this small town, in this state. He went there, he went to the town, and he found when he got there that his father had passed away just recently. So he went to the gravesite, and at the gravesite, he talks about feeling this rush of all these different emotions, anger and regrets and resentment and, sadness. And he, through all those emotions, he was able to find forgiveness. And he was also able to find this sense of purpose and meaning for his father being in his life, because he figured that if not for his father and leaving that kind of a mark in his life and setting in motion that motivation, he would not have become the person that he was, influencing thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people, and helping them in their lives.
And that's why they say forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. And, the lovely thing about my family is they're really good at faking it. So I can be in a room with them and we can all look fairly normal and interact fairly normally, even though it's not really that way. And that's what I choose to do. And I choose when I see my family and don't see my family, whether it's pleasant or not. I choose because who do I want to be as a sister, as a daughter? And I decided that a long time ago. And I, do my best to not take things personally, and to try to learn, what might my role have been in all of this, which is very difficult. It's very difficult to see your own stuff in any given situation. I think that's the challenge we have. And so, there's a practice that they do in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, on the 12-step programs. What they do is when you have resentment for someone, pray for them every day for 2 weeks. And what ends up happening is you figure out that you're not so different, that only human beings in pain hurt other human beings. And every time you've hurt another human being, it's because you were in pain. And that's why it feels not so bad when we hurt someone else, because it makes us feel better sometimes. And so those are those humbling, difficult things to do. And, really trying to open your heart, keeping your heart open and trying to love is such a hard thing.
It's so tough, so difficult to do, and to remain open and not close it up, because the natural tendency is to protect yourself, is to create this defense, so that you don't continue to be hurt. But the one thing we know in all relationships is that you can't prevent yourself from being hurt. You just can't. Doesn't matter how much of a defense that you have up. It's a lot easier to do that with a stranger, right? To have those defenses, to protect yourself, to go in guarded, because you haven't opened yourself up, to that person. You haven't, allowed yourself to be vulnerable with that person. But once you open yourself up to, a loved one, a family member, someone that you are trusting, with the vulnerable emotions you have inside, that risk of being hurt is going to be actualized. It is going to happen. Now, what we do with that hurt afterwards, that is really going to, determine what happens with the relationship.
And you know what? I think this might be a good spot for a comment that we got. And Jean, this is in regards to what you were saying about somebody who causes pain is probably hurt themselves. And the comment was, yes, I agree. And it totally clicks in those rare situations where you get to hear about the personal lives of somebody who wasn't acting very nicely to you. So they also mentioned, just like bullies, like in school, sometimes for these people who are acquaintances, we get to hear a little bit about what they're going through. And it's so easy to understand then, oh, that's why they were acting like that. That's why they were treating me like that.
Yeah, and when we understand that, it's so much easier to accept that. We have a little video on our YouTube channel about anger, and we kind of talk about if you could always see your partner as a child when they're angry and they're hurting. Because if your child comes to you and they could be saying, I hate you, and rah, you're not fair, and really not nice things, and you just love them through it because you don't take it personally, they're in pain, whatever. And that's true for all of us. And yet we see adults and we look at them and go, you should know better, you shouldn't act like that. But when we're in pain, we act like we're 5 years old again. That's how our brain works.
We're just really big kids when we are in relationships, right? We can be these big executives and command a whole bunch of troops and everything, but when it comes to that personal relationship and opening ourselves up at that most vulnerable level with another human being, we revert back to a time when we were children and we were hurt. And so that is what makes our relationships so complicated.
Yep. And so I think that the two most difficult things to do while we're in a body on this planet is to love and to forgive. And I haven't met anyone who doesn't struggle with that or deal with that. So it's the work. It's the work of being alive. And I think it's the culmination of growth is when you can have something settle inside of you in a way that isn't nagging at you. And things that nag at you are the unfinished business. The stuff we didn't say. And that's what she was talking about when her mom was dying. She went and said it. And now she's the one at peace. I don't know where her mom is and what she's doing. We don't get to know that. But Oprah's at peace.
And I would also have to say that, Oprah said that she doesn't hold a grudge anymore. And, it does get easier being able to let it go, being able to not hold on to that resentment and to forgive. But initially, when that hurt happens, it doesn't feel any less, right? It still feels just as painful as the first time you were wronged, right? So that pain is always going to cut deep.
And the closer you are to the person, the deeper the cut.
Yeah, the deeper it is. And what we've said in the past is it's inevitable, when you're, in your relationship with your committed partner, that they are going to hurt you really deeply.
Yeah, and leaning into that pain is the way out. Avoiding it keeps you in a place of anger and keeps you in a place of defense and toxicness and stuckness. And leaning into it, for me, one of the things that I'll do is I'll go and meditate. And that's when my meditation really turns into a form of prayer, where I'm actually asking for help in carrying this pain. If this is something I have to carry the rest of my life, how do I do that? And every time I've asked for that, something has shifted to some other level that has helped me find a little bit more peace and resolution. And it isn't because I said, take this from me, it's because I said, all right, make me stronger.
Yeah, I love the saying, they say that, don't ask God for a lighter load, ask God for a stronger back.
And the gift of that is that's how we grow. That's how we grow, is through struggle and pain. I know that's not a popular thing these days. And, with friendships, I think it's so much easier to toss those aside, to distance ourselves and to not work through the pain of those type of relationships. But family, no such luck. That is going to be your family the rest of your life, whether you see them, whether you don't see them. And there's so many families that, when we're working with someone, I say, well, what was the original riff? Why did you stop talking to this person or that person? And they'll say, I don't remember. I don't remember. And it's a program that we run, and it's so funny. And if you are in a place like that with a family member and you can figure out a way to cross back over that bridge and connect to that person, it's a fabulous thing. Whether you understand what happened, however you do it, it's like not carrying a cloud around with you anymore. At least that's what it feels like for me.
Yeah, which you have absolute control of. I mean, you don't have absolute control over, the relationship that you have with that person, and, you're the one that's going to carry that load. I love it when people sit there and tell me that I couldn't sleep. I was just sitting there tossing and turning about this hurt and this, thing that they did to me, right? And I always ask them, how did that other person sleep? Yeah, you don't know. I mean, maybe they slept really well.
You usually sleep really well. I stay up all night, you sleep well.
It is, I mean, yes, I mean, in the interactions you have with the person, at that point in time, you try to work things out, you try to rectify things. In those cases, if things can't be rectified, you have to find acceptance and forgiveness within yourself. But then after that, it is your responsibility, whether you're taking that with you along the way, whether it's eating yourself up. I had a client who was going through a divorce, and, she was constantly, just wringing her hands out because of the resentment that she had towards, her soon-to-be ex. And finally, she found it within her head to think about the divorce as a job, that she punches the clock when she's working on the divorce, and then she punches out when she's not working on the divorce, which allowed her to be able to focus on her life and focus on, filling up her life up with happiness and not bogging herself down with resentment and anger.
And what you both just said does apply. Those were very helpful in, thinking about how do we go about forgiving, especially within our family. I think we have enough time for one more question, if I can pose this before you start your wrapping up.
Sure.
So the question has a couple of parts. How can you maintain a positive interaction and relationship with someone who you do forgive? So knowing that you can forgive their actions, but if they keep doing the same hurt because they are close to you and important, how can one accept/forgive on a daily basis, or maybe shift the mindset to not let so much?
That is a lot of questions. Yeah. And, what I would say is, when we jump to forgiveness, when we haven't processed it and resolved it, it's too soon. And if something is continuously happening that is inappropriate or painful, that is not the place of forgiveness. That is the place of something else. And so I think that's the bigger question is, how do you remove yourself from a situation that isn't safe or less painful?
Yeah, finding forgiveness in yourself doesn't mean that you continue to put yourself in a position to be victimized.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, that's a completely separate topic, and that's about setting boundaries and being able to understand, the level of vulnerability that you have with people in your lives. And there are going to be people in your lives that have earned that spot of being able to be the closest to you that you could share, intimately, those deep, dark secrets and those painful points with them. But then there are people that haven't earned that spot. And so that doesn't mean that you allow yourself to be, put in a position to be hurt and to open yourself up to a person that's going to continuously hurt you.
When you think about anger, like fire, and there's so many benefits to fire. It puts the bugs out of our food. It warms our homes. It's very soothing to watch. There are trees that only reproduce at 300 degree temperatures or hotter. And so the purpose of fire in the forest is to clear out the overgrown and dead wood and to allow fertile soil to form from that process so those seeds can drop and new life can form. And so sometimes that anger is the process of trying to eliminate something that isn't healthy. And so that's a whole separate question. We have anger for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that we should avoid anger and be sunshine and rainbows and just smile all the time. So I hope that answers your question. That's a lot more work. We're not supposed to just tolerate things that are inappropriate or not.
Yeah, I mean, if we go by what Oprah said, and that is that, forgiveness is about accepting what has happened to you. Forgiveness isn't about allowing it to continuously happen.
So is this a good time to meditate?
It sure is.
All right. So this meditation is actually borrowed from one of Carol Mace's, MYSS, Carol Mace. She's a fabulous teacher. She's got a lot of stuff on YouTube if you ever want to follow her stuff. But this is one of her really great letting go ones. So go ahead and find a comfortable position and close your eyes. And as you breathe, bring your awareness into your heart center. And find one of your deepest levels of pain. And find one person associated with that pain. And I want you to fast forward to 5 minutes before the moment of your death. And the only person there with you is that person that caused you that much pain. And take a moment and think about the conversation. What they would say to you in this moment. And what you would say to them in this moment. Knowing that you have free will. Forgiveness isn't a right, it's a choice. And look into that person's eyes. And see your life slip out of your body. And how do you feel in this moment? And understand the process of the ripple effect. That a person in pain causes pain. And a person who goes through forgiveness ripples out peace. And bring your awareness back to your breath. And imagine that next to you is a bag. And that bag is filled with rocks. And each rock represents a pain that was caused by someone else. Rejection, abandonment, aggression, slights. And know that the choice is yours to leave the bag on the ground and walk away, or to pick it up and have it carry it with you through your life. And for the situations that are unresolved and inappropriate to resolve, because it's still trying to teach you to move away to a safer place that's more appropriate for both you and the person hurting you. Allow yourself to carry some of those rocks, feeling the weight of them. Take these situations in your life seriously, and as a way to learn to trust your intuition. And the wisdom to know the difference between resentment and protection. And take a moment now to think about someone else in this world that may have a similar experience, be carrying similar pain, resentment, anger. And bless that person. Remember that to bless someone simply means to hold them in the light for greater understanding. It doesn't mean to forgive or condone, just to hold them in the light. And know that each time you bless someone and hold them in the light, you can't help but stand in that light yourself. And allow your own growth process to take place. Allowing forgiveness to come in its own season, in its own time. And resolve in your heart to do your best and to love yourself through this journey, through this process. And for all your unresolved grief, pain, resentments, imagine lighting a candle that'll burn in the center of your heart until it's appropriate and you're ready to blow it out and walk away. And say a short prayer of gratitude for the forgiveness you are able to achieve and for the lessons which are more illuminated. And when you feel centered and present, gently open your eyes. It's always interesting to me that we are born alone and we die alone. And we always think all this drama is others, and it's really within ourselves. Have a great week. Thank you for joining us.
And until next time, synergize your life and synergize your love.